Welcome to Shardcast, the Brandon Sanderson podcast. We're a bunch of mega fans giving you the news, discussion, and of course, a whole lot of opinions about Brandon's works in the Cosmere. I'm Eric, and joining me is Ian.
Hey, I'm WeiryWriter.
Also joining me is Evgeni, creepily staring into his camera.
Hello.
Also joining me is someone not being creepy, Alyx.
Hi, I'm FeatherWriter.
And lastly, we have Shannon.
Hi, I'm Gray.
Hi, and I'm Chaos. And this week, we're going to talk about language and stuff, and in translation, and language and romantics in the Cosmere, and that'll be fun.
We haven't decided on the title yet.
Yeah, no, not really.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah,
We'll see what
this
it
is all planned.
Suggest the title in the comments below.
That'll be
The
great.
title card's just a bunch of question marks.
So, my understanding, Alyx, is that
Yes.
this podcast idea came about due to an argument in Discord.
Yeah, an argument, discussion,
discussion.
whatever. Yeah. But so for those who don't know, language and like linguistics is very much like a passion hobby of mine. I've studied it a little bit, but it's more just I'm really interested in it. And so I don't even remember how it came up, but somehow we started talking about like how would language and connection work if you were like learning a language and stuff like that. And we found out that, it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, this is obvious. This is probably the way it is. And everybody's mostly going to be in agreement. And then we very much weren't. And everybody had very different ideas about, no, connection doesn't work like that. What are you talking about?
Fantastic.
You're like, this would be a good Shardcast, I'm not a romantics person at all, and I was talking about romantics and looking at WOBs, and I don't look at WOBs either, so yeah, y'all pulled me way out of my comfort zone.
I don't think you've ever been on a WoB episode.
No, of course not.
You're like, no,
Never
I
know.
have no interest in this.
You
I
should
know
try it.
canon stuff very well, but I don't get into the extra canonical things.
Yeah, Alyx is also
The
not saying
apocryphal
that I was the
Cosmere
one
things.
arguing with
That's
her.
true. It was Gray.
It
Sorry,
was.
she's above me right now. I don't know where she is.
No, she's
Oh,
to
you're
your,
above me,
She's
so.
to your right.
Dang it.
She's above me.
No, she's above me.
Thank you, Discord, for putting everyone in random positions.
I'm Spartacus. No,
Excellent.
I'm Spartacus.
Oh.
So it was basically Alex said, "Hey, I think it works like this," and then I was like, "No, it doesn't." And then we started talking for a really long time, and then we still disagree.
Fantastic. This is the quality content that we want on this show.
Mhm.
So,
See, Gray and I are not a hive mind. We're
We
different.
actually
in
do
ways.
disagree on things from time to time.
whoa,
I don't know, sounds fake.
fake news. All right, let's talk about just some language in the Cosmere before we start just digging into romantics and connection and stuff.
I was kind of bringing up originally that so we obviously have connection as this like translation tool that lets you get around language barriers, but I really appreciate that Brandon has still made languages like a big part of the Cosmere, and it's not, I feel like a lot of sci-fi and stuff that has like, oh, this translates for you, a lot of times just uses that to ignore language, like, oh, it's
True.
fine, we solved it with magic or with a technology translator, it works perfectly.
Or a fish.
And
Or like in D&D where like, oh, everybody just speaks common in addition
Right.
to all this other
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that like language diversity and language history are very big. Like on Roshar especially, I feel like language is plot significant. And
I feel
linguistic
it's like it's
history.
everywhere in the Cosmere, because Brandon definitely you can
Mhm.
tell has an interest in linguistics, and
Mhm.
Peter has some linguistics, so it's something that they both care about getting right. And I feel like it's kind of everywhere in that no matter what world you look at, it's thought about even just a little in the world building, which is pretty cool for people who have an interest.
Yeah, and I think it's
it-
really cool that connection isn't just this like band-aid that totally fixes all of the way that it works then has to work in a specific way, and then you get weird stuff based on that too.
And going back to like Brennan being like interested in language, we've definitely seen him come a long way. Like, because language in Elantris is interesting. And
It was definitely a thing he wanted to explore, obviously, in
True.
Elantris.
yeah, but like he's also been getting better about like turns of phrase that fit the world.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
zinc-tongued raven, like for someone
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
like
That's a
silver-tongued.
good one.
Yeah.
It's like,
Or when they don't have silver. But
Mhm.
I do, what I do like about the Aeons is like I always love the symbology of them, and was sort of like how the language and the magic were actually kind of the same in that
Mhm.
yeah.
in that regard.
Oh, it's
You could
definitely cool.
You
I
modify the
Mhm.
language, you modify the symbol, you modify the magic, which
Mhm.
was I kind of like that.
yeah, I just don't
Which
care
is-
about Ionic pronunciation, but that's kind
Yeah,
of different.
forget the
Yeah.
pronunciation.
We don't have to talk
That's
about
not-
Ionic
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
did that one
Forget the
already.
Yeah, we did. We
pronunciation.
did.
It's
got
just
that
a
podcast.
cool. It's a cool
Yeah.
thing, and how he made it
It's
work.
a very cool idea, and
Yeah.
Mhm.
you can tell Brandon has gotten much better than just saying fanciful in-world swearing. You
Mhm.
know, he's
Yeah.
definitely gotten better at
Ugh,
Yeah.
colors.
Yeah.
Yes.
or just like merciful Dobie. It's like, well, okay, cool.
Or eating the wrong flower. Like that's from Oathbringer. That's
Oh.
something I think Ravenna says, or maybe it's
Ah.
Vasher. I don't remember.
Vivenna
Those
had
are-
so many things that she said, like that'll be crimson to break.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
that,
that was
I
the
remember
line
that
that got
one.
me.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a chapter title as well.
Is it?
Yeah, it
Oh,
is.
Yep.
That chapter is
Chapter
called
title.
Crimson to Break. Yeah.
I don't look at chapter titles.
Yeah.
You
Hey,
are
you
missing
can-
out.
You
No.
can get some
Oh.
key information like honor is dead.
I remember one. I remember one chapter title.
Oh yeah.
An animal.
Oh yeah. The one
Oathbringer.
where
An
down our
Oathbringer.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, ooh, I know what this means.
I think, to be real quick off topic, but I think one of my favorite chapter titles is in Words of Radiance. There's a chapter called The Day's Masterpiece. And
Oh, yeah.
it's not referring to anything in that chapter. It's referring to a phrase from Way of Kings.
Really?
Which is where, yes, it's right after Shallan gets shipwrecked, and she finds an old portrait that she did of Yasna, like when they first met. And back in Way of Kings, she described that portrait as the day's masterpiece.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was like, yeah. And I'd like
Oh.
just
That's
read
a
that chapter in Way
callback.
of Kings, and then I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's why it's called that, because that's how she described it when she
I'm
first drew
glad
it
Brandon
back then.
thinks about the chapter titles even if I don't look at them. So that's
Very
great.
cool.
That's
Well,
very great.
yeah. I
So,
I like one of my favorite linguistic things in Oathbringer is
Mhm.
Navani calling down our
Gemheart.
Gemheart. So
Yes.
adorable. That is
sure.
it makes
like
so
a
much
perfect
sense.
Pet name.
Yeah, it's so cute.
Great. It's great.
Oh,
So
man.
Roshar definitely has a lot of linguistic diversity due to
So
its storied history,
diverse history. It's
Yes.
dramatic history.
dramatic history. That definitely sums up
Yep.
things.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I think we see a lot of like language play on Roshar in terms of like the loan words that Alethi and I assume the other kind of foreign-ish languages, with things like chicken and wine.
I would call that
and-
vestigial. It's not.
Yeah.
They didn't loan it. They didn't. Okay, I guess maybe from the Shin.
yeah.
But like I feel
something.
like I feel like they kept it and just never took
Mhm.
it out.
But that's
over
definitely
the
something that
ages.
happens, yeah, in real world languages a lot. That
Yeah.
something tends to become known as something. I think, like, yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example, but now I can't. But it's very very very
Kleenex
authentic.
and Googling.
Yeah,
where,
things
like,
like
a very
a brand
specific thing has
name.
come to refer to everything.
Yeah, it's similar. Yeah.
Well,
I think that's a different example of that. Something that's been happening. The phrase "rolling down the window." We no longer.
I still roll
that's
down.
true.
the window.
Well,
Oh, that's
many of us don't
Yeah.
actually roll down the
Right.
window of the car.
Mhm.
But that's like
I have a
that phrase is not going to
2002.
change anytime
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah,
Or dialing a telephone.
or using this symbol, but for the
Yeah.
phone. But this isn't
Yeah.
what phones look like. And now you
That's
get
true.
little kids being like, they're gonna
Yeah,
call
they
someone.
They do this.
Oh my
save as
God,
a
do they?
floppy disk icon.
Yeah. the ancient symbols of.
um,
Of the
One of the
olden
things-
days.
I don't think we've seen it quite as much on Roshar, but something you see on Earth a lot is a generic term in another language becomes a specific term when it's loaned, like
Chai.
chai, yeah, which just means tea, but
Yeah.
now because we took it from that language, we associate it with a certain kind of tea, or
From there.
Oh,
Nan bread.
right. Yeah,
Things
you're
like that.
totally right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always
Or-
bothered me, by the way.
Yeah, place names. There's a lot of deserts that, when translated, just mean desert, like
Sahara
Desert.
Desert. Gobi Desert.
and yeah, a lot of them just
Technically,
mean desert in there.
It's just the Sahara. You're not supposed to say desert after it.
The
So.
Los Angeles.
We're gonna keep
Angels.
saying it. That's
Yeah,
just
the
how.
Los
That's just
Angeles
MLB
how
baseball.
the Angels.
the GTA area. Just
Yeah.
the ATM machine.
Oh no,
Just
you
So
said
I-
the unholy phrase.
There
I
was
must dial my PIN number.
oh yeah,
No.
PIN number.
my SIN
Um,
number. Yeah.
I feel I've heard people talk about like, oh, the fact that they call all birds chickens is very confusing on Roshar.
But he
and-
describes the look of the bird. And, like,
Yeah.
that's
and
the
I-
giveaway.
Actually, I think that's how this started. This conversation. Someone was
Right.
complaining about that, and I was like, "No, it's actually a really cool linguistic thing."
Well, and it makes sense because there's not a lot of birds in Eastern Roshar if we're outside of Shinofar. Like, why would you need
Yeah.
more words
You don't
for
need
that?
Like,
Whereas something...
because you know for a fact at first that the Shin do have chickens because we see that they're trading the chickens for food. And so you're like, oh, okay, sure, they're only used to chickens. But then you get one described later, like when they go to the menagerie, and you're like, wait,
Yeah.
that's not a chicken.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
And then-
green and it has a bunch of
Layer it.
feathers at the
Yeah.
top of its head. And you're like, "What?
this
What's happening here?"
this
What?
kind of just reminds me. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, because this is going
Mhm.
back into the annals of my brain where I don't quite remember who actually said this.
'Kay.
But just like in the real world, there are certain cultures that have multiple words for what we would say is the same thing, and
Mhm.
so
the
that
infamous 26 words for snow or whatever.
yeah. So something
Mhm.
important to your culture, you would have more words of. The thing that's
More
sticking out
specificity.
in my brain is if you have more words for colors, like shades of colors, then that kind of
Mhm.
affects how you think about and
Yes.
see
You
colors.
can actually
Very
perceive
much
more
so.
colors. So if you are,
Yeah.
they did this experiment where it's sort of like nobody in this culture one had blue, but they had so many different
Right.
colors
Yeah.
for greens, and so giving the same palette of colors, someone from the west could not pick them out. They're like, this is all the same shade of green.
Mhm.
But then for someone in that culture who has the names for all the different shades, they're like, oh, it's so obvious, like da 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 da, let's line them up.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad that I remembered this and was like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a
it's-
cool
it's
fact.
very
But
cool.
it's just like this for Alethi in chickens. I don't see chickens that often. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna like talk about different things. Well, I guess they kind of use rock bugs.
And it's sort of like, I feel
Yeah.
like that's also kind of like they actually have much more limited things. Like when they talk about wine, they only have so many ways to make alcohol, whereas we have so
Mhm.
many ways to make alcohol.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
they don't have that many like small mammals, but they only have a few small mammals, so they just call them all minks and stuff like that. When you must be like, oh, there must be like rats and cats and something in there as well. But
My impression was that minxes specifically are cats,
Very possibly.
or something
I'm-
very similar to cats.
on
like-
Roshar,
yeah.
okay.
I thought they were actual
I-
minks. So
Because
I'm
I
sure
saw
there
them
are
in,
actual
I saw
minks
them in
around, too.
reference to like being thought of as pests or like living in like the vents in like Urithiru. There's not vents in
God,
Urithiru,
I-
but you know what I mean.
I
Those
don't
vents.
remember minks being referenced in Stormlight at all. So I'm like, oh, okay.
It's
They
very
are.
it's not as much as chickens. But it's
Yeah.
only a couple times, but it is in there. And
Cool.
so that gets you
Mhm.
thinking. You're like, wait, is that really a mink or is that just like
yeah.
small rodents, pests?
Yeah. Yeah.
Da 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 da.
Okay.
It's very.
There's
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in terms of like words from other languages taking on sort of different meanings, English kind of sees this because it got smushed between its Germanic roots and French influence. And so a lot of the times we
Yeah.
have different names for animals than we do for the food that you eat from that animal. And that's because the the food word is based on, the animal word in French that described everything, but now we've taken it and it only refers to food, and if you want to talk about the animal, you use the Germanic root because that was
and that's because like the peasantry that were like keeping the animals
right.
spoke Proto-English, whatever, like
Proto-Germanic,
Old
Nordic,
English,
Nordic
Yeah.
English. Yeah.
and the wealthy elite
Educated.
who were eating
Yeah.
all of these animals spoke
Yep.
Norman French. So
Yeah.
Mm.
It's
To
definitely
this
a
day-
class thing. Yeah.
To this day, I have to pause every time I hear or say either beef or pork, and decide which
Make
one
sure
is the
it's-
one I'm
it's the
thinking of.
right one. Yeah.
Right.
Those were the worst.
That's
Oh, really?
interesting.
Cool.
Interesting.
That is cool.
You-
Languages are fun.
You can tell Brandon's put obviously the most effort in world building Roshar for this purpose, obviously, because it's the most alien language. And there's lots of different types of languages, like some coming from, Dawn chant and stuff, and the
Yeah.
singer language. I also
Well,
like go ahead.
Dane and the Singer languages are related.
Yep.
They're like part of the same
Yeah,
family.
yeah. Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Because they were.
Well, yeah, 'cause-
Paul,
I mean, you've got a very big like linguistic event on Roshar now that we know for sure, confirmed in canon. Like there was an alien invasion of humans, pretty much.
yeah.
And that makes a huge difference on the linguistic landscape of the whole planet, because all of a sudden you're gonna get pidgin languages and creoles that turn into their own languages, and you borrow words from each other and all of this weird
And then
stuff.
you get
that-
lots of weirdness, as we see.
and no one knows how to spell. So
Yeah.
that's also important for the formation of languages. Settling your spelling.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking how probably the world that has the least amount of language diversity is Scadrial, but you helpfully put in our podcast document that
Scadrial is still very
there-
important linguistically.
there is a brand new language family that none of the Northerners know about in the Southern Scadrians.
Yep. We heard we know that the our Scadrial is the north. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
That the Northerners do have like scholars of ancient languages, like early Lord Ruler days and before his ascension.
Yep.
But they don't probably have any kind of idea of like modern linguistics, because it's not something they need. Everybody speaks
Because it
the
was so
same language.
homogenized. Yeah,
And
they
it's
don't
sort of
even
like-
have scholars on it, really.
It's gonna
you
be
don't
like-
even know how to learn languages because there aren't any other languages to learn.
And
Well,
it's
there-
like there's
there
no point in
is-
etymology.
There are two in Final Empire. There's like
Mhm.
Imperial Standard, and then there's Terrace, which
Is
are
Terrace
but they're
actually a
related.
language?
Yes.
Yeah, that got
pretty
preserved.
sure.
I think
Okay.
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I mean, you can tell that there's
Might be the keepers kept it. I would be
Yeah.
surprised.
what
Yeah.
keepers kept it. No way.
Ha,
but like
Mhm.
their naming structure is very distinct, and so I think there's pretty
Yes.
clearly
Yeah.
some
Like
sort of-
Sazed has a line at some point where like he's mentions that like like the Imperial language is actually an offshoot of like ancient Terrace.
Mm. Oh,
So,
yeah, that
like,
would make sense.
Sure.
Terrace itself has to have survived, otherwise it would just be like
Mhm.
the language.
Yeah, it's also kind of the situation where there's like there's no point in even like going back into the roots, because it's all just the current word is just the new version of the old word, and there's
Mhm.
no weird mixing like we see in English. Like
Mhm.
you go back to English and you're like, ooh, what root is this from? Ooh, is this a French? Is this a Latin? Is this a what is
Yeah.
it? But in like when you have thousands and thousands of years of everything is the same, basically. There's no real point of like even studying the history of the language, because it's just
the
Some
spellings have
heavy
been
language
standardized for 1,000 years.
preservation. Yeah.
preservation is
Preservation
getting
of languages.
doing his
It is like-
work.
The Lord Ruler, like he's not gonna like pick up new slang. Like he's gonna talk the way he talks because he's God.
He's
So
he's
it's
gonna do what he wants.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I don't like you changing that word. Just use the old word that I like.
Okay,
So,
will do. But things can definitely diverge.
mhm.
Yeah. I
And
mean, Eastern street slang now
Yeah.
being kind of recognized as its own dialect. I don't think it's a language, but close enough.
No.
Yeah, dialect certainly.
I
But
feel
high polluting dialect.
well, and you can tell that there's lots of different dialects that Wayne uses, obviously. And I
That's
feel
true.
like
Yeah, accents and stuff.
you can
yeah.
tell people from the Roughs talk differently than Ellendale, and so I feel like things are diverging more. Not that the Ska nobility talked the same; they didn't, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the different dominances in the classical era of Scadrial would have had, or the Final Empire era of Scadrial would have had.
There you go.
Got there eventually.
No, that's possible. It's really not clear.
Mhm.
I mean, looking at like the names, for example, I feel like
That's true. Yeah, you're totally right. The names definitely have distinct roots.
Yeah, there's
Mhm.
some stuff there. I think the Southerners definitely have to have actual linguistic diversity of multiple languages down there. I can't remember if they ever actually talk about it, but the fact that they made connection medallions
yeah.
before
Yeah.
coming to the
That's
north,
true.
they needed to
Mhm.
communicate with someone. Like you wouldn't have prioritized that
Well,
before if you didn't have different language groups. I feel like.
not to get this totally off track,
Mhm.
but that very much depends on how the Southerners looked during the Final Empire. Like how
That's true.
who knows how they survived and various things. It's very
Mhm.
mysterious. But
Yeah.
one of the craziest things that I found in rereading Bands of Mourning is that the Khandra said that the Southerner language and symbols, they
Mhm.
were not in the words of founding at all.
It's
Huh.
new.
Well, it just was. So I feel like even in classical Scadrial,
Mhm.
the whatever things Alendi and Rashek and all those 14 lands,
Mhm.
dealt with, the Southerners were distinct from that and were far
Hmm.
away.
I mean,
Likely.
a world away.
Yeah, but well,
Yeah.
maybe, but it's just the world wasn't as big as classical Scadrians thought it was, which is very interesting, and so it just wasn't in any of the roots.
I
No.
could see that 1,000 years of linguistic drift in the South could make it not recognizable.
That's
yeah, but
Oh.
I feel like something in the Keepers, they would remember something about it.
Well, like, how long had they been examining that languages? And like, they only had like pictures. Like,
I
right?
feel like the Khandra could just ask Harmony. And even though Harmony
Would
was
he
distracted.
answer?
That's true.
Like,
He
no.
talks to the Khandra. He talks to the
He
Khandra.
does.
That's true.
So, like, if the Khandra are like, yeah, no, we don't know what this language is, that, like, kind of means a lot. It's not like, it's an extremely warped thing of that we kind of know. It's totally different.
Well, it's like they wouldn't have enough. It's warped enough that they can't connect it to what it was.
Mhm.
Was my point. It's like
I suppose
it's
that's
divergent enough that
possible.
they don't have enough pieces to connect them.
Yeah, possibly. I think Scadrial is actually going to be one of the more important worlds in examining how connection works with normal language learning, which was kind of the kind of focus of our argument that we had, or discussion or whatever. Because you're going to have a lot of demand for people who can speak naturally without connection, and
Mhm.
but if there's a way to use connection to kind of jumpstart language learning, or if connecting with a language and speaking it for a while could make it easier to learn once you lose the connection, like how that all works, I think Scadrial is going to be sort of the focus for that, in being able to see how those things interact. And how does it affect your ability to learn a language naturally? Does it make it easier? Does it not affect you at all because it stuff like that. It's
Should we
gonna be-
move right on into the connection part of
Yeah.
this?
We can do that.
Mhm.
Oh,
Connections,
so
super interesting because
it is.
we see it used a lot, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of translation errors.
Yeah.
You can generally see who's an Althean on Roshar if they use weird color metaphors. So if you see a new person doing a weird
Yep.
color metaphor at this stage, you know they are not Rosharan.
Yeah, or
Mhm.
using the word coin.
Yeah. Hoyd
Or
slips up.
Mr.
Soil.
Hoyd,
There it
Yeah.
was.
There's
to
Yeah.
a degree.
the Natan guy from Words of Radiance uses soil in a weird way, and Brendan's like, yeah, you should have. Good for catching that. That's not
Yeah.
how Rosharans use that word.
If you use soil meaning dirt, then that's the giveaway.
Mhm.
Because
There-
they don't have soil except in Shinobar.
I totally forgot that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
mhm.
very obscure and irrelevant like throwaway one-liner in the middle of like a way of
They
King's Sea.
always are.
Yeah,
Um,
but
It's very
They-
subtle.
that's how Brandon gets them past us.
Hoyd talking to Kaladin and using, a chick and a bunny, and Kaladin's like, "What? What's a bunny?
I guess that's true.
A baby chicken?" And he's like, "Oh, okay, a piece of wet slime and disgusting crab thing with 17 legs. That'll work better for
There was a
Roshar."
word of Brandon that was saying how the connection medallions, wasn't the best way of using connection. It was a pretty rudimentary way of doing it. And
Yeah,
I guess
is.
I
we
just
have
thought
that one.
that Hoyd would be better at that, but clearly there are still translation
Hoyd
errors.
is probably the best at it that we've ever seen. Hoyd is a
So-
cool case because he is very linguistic minded and he actually knows some of these, he learned them himself, but he also uses the connection magic really, really well because he needs to sound like a local
Mhm.
all the time. And he can finagle it.
Wasn't there specifically about Hoyd a thing where somebody asked whether he uses connection or whether he learns the languages,
Yes.
and Brandon said, to my recollection, that Hoyd is good with the magic, but he's also lazy, and so like he doesn't want to learn the language, he wants to just go to the connection magic, but because he's good at it, he gets more mileage out of it then.
I don't think that's not what the WOB says. It's not because he's good at languages that he's good at it. He's good at he's good at filtering the magic in the way that he wants.
Yeah,
But it's not
that's what I said.
it's not because he's good at language learning.
He's decent with languages, is what Brandon said.
But he needs
Yes.
but that was
no matter how
unrelated.
gifted you are.
Yeah.
You need the connection to be really good at it. So yeah, it's more that he's good with with connection rather than that he's good with languages.
Yeah,
that's-
it's sort of like it comes
Yep.
off as two separate things.
Yep.
He's good at languages and he's really good at the connection magic.
Mhm.
But like connection can only get you so far. It's like sometimes like
Mhm.
there just isn't a word for what you're trying to say.
Yeah, but like we know that like if you know it already, because that thing about we have a WOB about Hoyd and puns, is that
Mhm.
he can filter his intent through the magic. He has the intent to pun. And then the magic, if the connection's working right, it'll pick like actually a local native idiom that's a pun, and it doesn't actually force Hoyd's specific pun through the translation magic unless he really wanted to use specifically that, in which case the connection magic would filter it literally. But if he just is sort of like, I want this broad idea with a pun, the connection magic will correctly translate it to and not just a literal language translation, but into a pun that would actually make sense in the
Mhm.
language he's going for.
Interesting.
Okay.
It
I
does
have-
work like an interpreter.
Yeah.
Thanks to Shannon, I have now realized why Hoyd did not take a shard of Adonalsium, because there wasn't a pun shard.
Yeah.
Hey.
Basically.
Can't filter that intent.
He
Um,
does
right?
love to pun, yeah.
This is all interesting because it shows us that neither Vasher nor Vivenna are anywhere near as good as Hoyd when it
Mhm.
Right.
comes to this, because they slip a lot more.
Yeah, or it's sort of like you get the idea that they are not thinking on that level. Like they want to say their idiom, and so
right, and
it'll
they're not thinking
translate.
generically. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
thinking more
It-
literally.
Could also be that they're the Nalthian language that they use. I don't think it was ever named or anything.
I think they're just speaking Hollandren.
Yeah.
Initially.
Yeah.
It may be that it is very heavy in using metaphors and idioms in a way that Alethi maybe isn't. And so maybe there's, if they were really thinking more in Alethi, they wouldn't even try to use that many idioms. But because they're just used to like, oh yeah, say an idiom to describe what this is like, that sort of thing.
Also, Hoyt has
happening
been
more.
doing this for
Well,
like
yeah.
5,000 more years at the bare minimum. So
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the sense he can fiddle with the connection magic probably more than anyone even thinks to mess with the connection magic, is my understanding.
That
I-
definitely makes sense. Huh, this is really cool.
I
dig
think
into
one of the
this.
things that I'm curious about
Mhm.
as someone who learns languages and has like gone through the academic process of learning two languages of various degrees, I always saw a connection as it could be a shortcut in natural language learning. And that if you knew what you were looking for when you started speaking the new language, you could listen to yourself, you could figure out the way that you were phrasing sentences, the order that you were putting, subject object verb or subject verb object. You could get used to the way that the sounds feel in your mouth. If that new language has consonants that your natural language doesn't, you could get used to saying them like a native. You could get the feel for them, and then when you went back to you lost connection and you were back, you'd retain some of that familiarity with the language, even if you couldn't automatically make the connections anymore.
See,
I don't think that's how it works at
And
all.
Grave
I
is very much
also
disagreeing
definitely
with me on
don't
this.
think
I
that's how it works.
100% disagree. I think all of the wobs that we have gathered here like back up my point.
Well,
Dalinar doesn't recognize that he is really speaking Aesish. Like, he doesn't know that he's even speaking different sounds than his own.
my impression of what Feather was saying, whether that was the intent or not, was that you don't necessarily remember a lot of the things. Like, you have to make a conscious, intentional effort to go, I am now aware that I'm speaking a different language. Let me try to remember things about that language, even though they're going to sound very natural to me right now.
Mhm.
So English has become very close to a natural language to me. Mess up the grammar, mess up words here and there, but it comes very easily. I think in English, I speak in English,
Right.
I
Yeah.
dream in English a lot of the time.
Mm.
And so I speak that naturally,
Mhm.
but I can also, whenever I'm saying things, I can pause and I can think and I can go, I am now going to pay attention to the things I'm saying and the way I'm saying those things so
Mhm.
that I can make conclusions about how the language works and why is it so messed up.
Yeah.
I mean,
English is a mess.
Everyone
You
agrees
also
that
learned the language,
Yeah.
and connection people are not learning the language. Is sort of like is the distinction that Brandon has made a few times in WOBs, is that the way that someone who learns the language is different than the way someone who's speaking the language with connection thinks of the language.
But that's not the intent, right? So the question is not how are two people, one who's a natural speaker, one who's learned a language, learned in quotes, the language through connection, how are they different? The question is, if you, let's say I get access to a connection medallion
Mhm.
and I go to Germany and I tap that. Let's say I don't know any German. I used to know some. Let's say I don't know any. I can, as I'm speaking, so the same way I can speak my natural Bulgarian and pick up on things that this language does. Like, I can pick up on the grammar of a language that I'm speaking, even if I don't have a formal education in how that grammar works. Like, I just by, hey, all of my life I've been putting these words in this order, and these are phrases, they're idioms that don't actually mean things literal. It's like I can remember things like that, and I can remember their existence even if I forget the exact thing that I was like. I can make inferences about the grammar even if I forget every word of that language.
Mhm.
And so if I were to go and, let's say, go to Germany, use a medallion, I can start paying attention to, hey, this language has a lot of compound words. This language says ours in a specific way.
Mhm.
This language forms past tense in this specific way. Like things like these words are now gendered. Uh, and then I lose that connection and I lose all of the specific knowledge of, well, table is a gendered word and it's, I don't remember what table was, but let's say it's a feminine.
Mhm.
I can forget that, but I can still remember the concepts. And so going all the way back to Feather's original point, yes, you don't remember the language, but you remember certain things that make the subsequent natural learning of the language, should you choose to pursue that, easier.
I'm still not sure I agree because I did understand that was the point.
Yeah.
Because based on basically, we only get one person's point of view from someone who's done this. We kind of see it from the external, from other people. We've seen the external Alec, we've seen the external Hoyd. So we don't actually know what they think or what they're doing. I think
Mhm.
Hoyd is, when we finally get his point of view more, that's going to be the most valuable
Yes.
take
True.
on this, is because he's both the gifted linguist who's learned the languages and also the one who's used the connection. But based on how we've seen other people respond to it, they don't seem to have any sort of familiarity with the language after they've broken the connection. So like, I can see that thinking, but based on what we see, the characters and how they react, I don't think that they retain even that much.
So one of the examples that I can think of in terms of like what I'm thinking about would be if you suddenly gifted me how to speak English with connection. I wasn't an English speaker before. And all of a sudden I heard myself say the word who in one sentence and whom in another, and trying to figure out why did I use who there and whom elsewhere. And that's something that a lot of English speakers don't necessarily know. They don't know why it's whom in one place and why it's whom in another. And that's something that, I think if you were connected or if you were a native speaker, you could gloss over it. It sounds right. It feels right. You don't have to think about it. You can be on autopilot and just talk, and the magic makes it work. But if I was someone who'd studied grammar, I could say, oh, well, I'm using that. One of those words happens when the word that I'm replacing would be a subject, and the other one happens when the word that I would be replacing is an object. And I know those grammatical terms enough that I can, even as I'm speaking it and as I'm using it, I could kind of place, oh, that's serving that grammatical function, or oh, that's but I think you would have to have been grammatically trained or linguistically trained in order to make those connections, and you'd have to do it very intentionally and consciously. Try to break it down in your head. What am I actually saying? What are these words actually functioning? And I think you talked when we talked about this before about, we don't see Dalinar doing this at all. He doesn't seem to phase him at all, and I think that still makes sense with this. That yes, you can just talk. You can totally autopilot it. It won't feel weird at all. It just feels like you're speaking natively, and it functions. But I think if you did put that conscious effort into it and tried to break the language down while you spoke it, I think it would be possible to get some of those overarching concepts out of a language from connection.
Okay, so I learned more about English grammar in my French classes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like learning French grammar is like
Yep.
that. It's like there's all learning your native language. Like there's so much stuff that it just goes in your brain. It's like, this is how it's done, but you don't understand the rules unless you're looking at something that has different rules. So it makes sense that in order to learn a language through connection so that you have it always, it's like you have to have that framework of understanding how language works to
Yeah.
begin with. Otherwise, you're just a native speaker. It's like that's just how grammar works. Like you don't have the tools to understand to pick apart the language.
Yeah. Shannon?
I forgot what I was going to say.
Well,
So I think this really comes down to how much the connection medallions, how much you can perceive as you're using them. And that's really the central question, because you guys think that if you were linguistically trained, you can actually like hear the words that you are saying and pick apart what those words are.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that's the case. I'm kind of
Yeah.
with you, Shannon, because the connection medallions are pretending like it's tricking yourself that you were born and grew up in that place. I don't even know if you could even consciously discern if you were using different sounds at all. Period. Like I'm not sure.
Based on like how we see Dalinar think, and I don't think it's because he was. I think that that requires a level of self-awareness that connection doesn't actually allow. I think because it seemed so natural to Dalinar, he's not speaking Alethi. He's literally speaking Azish. And it's sort of like the thinking. If the thinking actually goes in line with the connection, like that little shift in thinking when the connection changes your language, I think whatever you connect to, you would almost, but depending on who or what you connect with, that would be the starting point of how natural it is. If the person that you're connecting to doesn't think about their own language at all, it's just like what connection does is it makes you a native speaker.
So I think one of the things we're getting at here is the differences between what the connection medallions do
Yeah.
and what Dalinar is doing. Because with the connection medallions, like it is completely switching. It's like your native language is now this. You don't have that old language anymore, theoretically.
Mhm.
But with Dalinar, he's adding a language, but he still has Alethi. Like after connecting with someone, like he can switch between Alethi and Azish.
Can he?
So I'm pretty sure because he says like the connection lasts multiple days. He's not stuck speaking Azish that entire time.
Sure.
I just think it could be conscious that it's like I'm using this black box of Azish, but not understand what that means because
I don't
magic's
even think
short-circuiting it.
I don't think he's that conscious of it. He's just
Yeah.
talking to this person. And in fact, we actually never see a scene like in this level of detail where he goes and speaks Azish and then he turns and goes speaks Alethi. We
what about
it's glossed over in like the scenes later in Urithiru. Sorry, but I just want to make clear that we never see it in that detail.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask about when they meet as a council in Urithiru.
So like we get like and it's like a paragraph. It's sort of like, and then Dalinar refreshes his connection to talk to them, and then he has to do it over and over again. But we never actually see like a scene where it goes. No, I don't think we do.
I think part of this is that Dalinar is a terrible example because he's not a linguist or a scholar or anything.
That's
what
true.
I think
So
a lot. Yeah.
And that's what I've been trying to say, right? In all of these examples that we have, none of those people have ever gone, hey, I'm speaking a different language. Let me make a conscious effort to try to understand how that language works so that later on, if I decide to learn that language, I can, like, they've all been using it as a tool very directly, right?
Yeah.
And the way I'm thinking about it is, well, if I were, let's say, all of a sudden, the only language I know is English, and I've always been a native English speaker, I can still go, let me think about the grammar of this language that is my native language and that I speak naturally. And I can point to a word and go, this is a noun and this is a verb, and I can write down 1,000 sentences and go, well, here is the order of these different sentence elements.
Structures.
Sure.
Sentence structures.
Sure.
Yeah.
These things.
Mhm.
But that's not something that's going to ever come to me naturally. Like, I need to make a conscious effort, and Dalinar doesn't do that. Alyx doesn't do that.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
So
One thing I have trouble with that in the conscious effort thing is also that the more you're consciously trying to compare it to your old language, the less the connection magic works. If you are constantly trying to break, like, and trying to half remember, half forget that you are not this native speaker, I think that actually affects how well the magic works in and of itself. Does that make
But
sense?
I wouldn't, like, Alyx, for example.
Yeah.
He loses his original native language.
Yeah.
But the same way, I don't know if any of you know, or if any of you know just a single language, but you can make an effort to understand that language without knowing any other language.
Yeah.
Either before or after.
yeah. So I actually think learning a language via connection is going to be easier if you're doing what Dalinar is doing versus a connection medallion.
I do agree with that.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Because like with Dalinar, like you're actively like manipulating your own connection. It's not just I don't think it's just a complete overwrite.
No, well, it's not an overwrite. Yeah.
Whereas like with the medallions, like I do think it's a complete overwrite. You're not. It's like you can like think about like breaking it down, but you can't compare it back to your actual language, which isn't technically necessary, but it's also like messing with how you think. So like we don't know if like, hey, like if you're just using one of the medallions, you're thinking like, okay, this is how my language works. If you revert that, that might all just be your native language. It might not be the language you were just accessing. It could actually manipulate your own memories.
Yeah. I think maybe part of the place that we differ is where we think connection affects you. I think that like definitely Argent and I, our connection happens at the thought level. That and that makes sense to me because you get things like culture and like idioms. I think if you are still thinking in your old language and your old culture, and connection was just sort of intercepting before it turned into words, I feel like you'd lose things like puns and idioms. I think you need to be thinking in that language and thinking in that culture.
If you're thinking in that language and culture, then I don't. If the magic is short-circuiting you and so that you're automatically thinking in that new culture, I don't know if there's this step where you're allowed to perceive any difference. Your brain is just like, the magically, instantaneously changing it for you in your brain, and you don't even perceive that you're speaking something different.
But you will be aware because you.
Well, you're aware, but you're not gonna know that what these Azish sounds are. That's what I'm saying. Like, you could not perceive that because that is you're thinking like that. There's no ability for you to step back while you're using it.
I mean, I think that was what Evgeni was kind of trying to say. Like, even if you're only a native English speaker, you can break English down and learn its grammar. You just don't do it automatically. And so, especially if you were someone who had linguistics training, even if you couldn't compare to your old language, even if you weren't going to break the magic by remembering that you're not a native speaker, you know, if you have concepts like, here's what parts of speech are, here's what different languages can do with those parts of speech, even if I'm not comparing it to a different language, I can start to recognize in the language that I'm speaking, if that makes it. You don't have to have another language to compare it to if you understand how all languages share structures and the different kinds of structures that they can have.
Shannon?
It's sort of theoretically, I think that's fine. I just don't think there's any basis for it right now. That's just not how we see people respond to the use of connection. So it's sort of like when we see someone, this is sort of like I want to either get a wob or a future character who actually has the linguistic training. But
Yeah.
for right now, it's sort of like that entire thing basically comes down to people not paying attention enough. And I'm not sure that's a
True.
good enough. I'm not sure that's a good enough basis.
I see, and I guess to me it doesn't feel like not paying attention because there's so many people who speak their own languages without knowing how they work or figuring out how they work.
Well,
I think
to
that's
me,
the
they're sort of
default.
like, I don't think that's the default. I don't think it's binary. I don't think it's people who've been linguistically trained and people who aren't. I think there are people who like still have a sense of like the language that they're speaking and the rhythm and all of that, and still would be able to tell some sort of retention. I don't think it's necessarily a conscious, yes, I've been trained, or conscious, no, I'm just going along with the flow. Like this whole thing is a spectrum. And basically, I don't think it's that simple unless we get someone who's already been trained that way and we see it happen on the page.
Let me give you all an example of my life, and I'm still working through how that's relevant. I'm not sure which side I'm supporting with this.
Okay.
Okay.
But for the first few years of my life, until sometime in kindergarten, language to me, nouns in a language were all gendered. Like that's how languages work. This is how you speak.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there were other languages where that was not the case. And then I learned a little bit of English, and I found out that this is not necessarily the case. This is not the case in English. So if I were, let's say 6, let's age me a little bit. Let's say I'm 12.
Okay.
and some guy in a van hands me a medallion and is like,
Guy in a van.
That's a very
Let's
creepy.
say a trusted adult gives you a medallion.
look, it was a different time.
Hey, kid, you want a language? Come here.
You a teacher or a parent or trusted adult gives you a medallion.
That they got from their trench coat.
No, stop. Extremely bad.
So let's say I'm 12 and I come in possession of a connection medallion.
Oh,
Sure.
in possession. I thought you said in position. I was like, wait, whoa.
Stop.
Welcome to Shardcast After Dark.
Language
Maybe
edition.
before dark.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say I don't know any. To me, all languages have gendered nouns. Period.
Right.
I use that medallion to become a native English speaker, and now to me, all languages don't have gendered nouns, and I'm trying to decide whether I can make use of that information at all. Like, if I don't know that there are even other languages out there where nouns work differently, even if I were paying attention to my words and my grammar and the noises my face flap is making, I don't think that's something I would be able to pick. Maybe there are other things. Maybe there are other like tenses, future tense and past tense, present. Like maybe there are similarities there that I can pick up. But there are also probably things that are completely unknowable.
Right.
I guess I'm just thinking with let's say spiritual adhesion, you still have a Lethe still exists.
Right.
You can be conscious of a Lethe, right? But I think once you've spiritually connected to Azish, right, you now have in your brain a magical black box, okay? And when you are using that black box, you are not conscious of the sounds coming out of your face hole at all. Like, I don't know. Maybe. Like, again, we don't really know, right? But I'm thinking that it's changing the way you are thinking about things, and you're just thinking natively in Asian when you're
Because
talking there.
like in every wob that like, or not every wob, but basically every wob, Brandon always makes the point native speaker when
Yeah.
you're using connection. You're connecting to it as if you are a native speaker.
I
And like
guess
to me,
Mhm.
I guess my question then, because I think we may disagree on this, is in Dalinar's case.
Yeah.
Do you think he thinks in Alethi, speaks in Azish, but hears himself speak Alethi?
I
Or
am
do you
not sure.
or do you
Yeah,
think
that's the question.
he thinks in a language, Azish, I guess, speaks in Azish and hear himself in Azish, but it's like he doesn't pick that as a foreign language.
I think he is not picking it up as a foreign language at all.
I think he's speaking in Asish. I think he's hearing it in Asish. He, for all intents and purposes, is basically Asish on like this weird hacked up spirit web level.
Yep.
I don't know what he's thinking in, because essentially once you know more than one language, you kind of speak or you kind of think
You think
in a
differently, yeah.
non-language.
Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
so
I only
al-
speak English. I only think in English. Maybe Evgeni can help us, but I've heard or read that people who are speak 2 or more languages think in a non-language. You like it goes a little bit higher or deeper.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, there are times when I have an internal monologue running,
Yeah.
and in my head I would be going in whatever language I'm thinking of in the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to go pick up some tomatoes from the
Your
store or whatever.
mundane running conscious
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. That's not all the time. Sometimes I don't have like verbal thoughts in my head.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But to go back to Dalinar, because he's far more interesting than me.
More interesting than all of us, let's be honest.
That's true.
Let's be honest. Yeah.
He's
People
the
are more
coolest.
interesting than Dalar.
He's the coolest.
I guess for the whole language thing to work, and this applies to Alec as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like the actual physical shape that his muscles and tongue and larynx and in order for other people to hear Azish,
Mm-hmm.
his entire vocal apparatus must be making the appropriate motions for Azish.
Yeah.
Which means he must also be hearing Azish.
Yep. Correct.
Mhm.
Azish is going into his ears.
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
What
yeah,
his
Yeah.
brain
Yeah.
interprets those sounds into.
What like my thing is that when you speak another language, your entire mouth shape is different.
Mhm.
Like, and
That's
especially
reasonable.
like Dalinar does not notice. He thinks he's still speaking his own language.
Yeah.
He does not notice any physical difference in the way that he's talking.
Yeah, because I feel like he thinks he's talking Alethi, but it's just
Yeah.
magically translated into Azish, and he just doesn't notice.
I don't know that you would notice if if the connection makes it feel natural and you're not thinking about it, then it just feels natural. I don't
Yeah.
see that as
If you think that you're speaking English and then all of a sudden my mouth is doing this weird thing and like I'm speaking the little bit of French that I know and I'm not bilingual. I know like 5 sentences. I feel like I would still be able to tell.
Mhm. Yeah.
But he can't tell, which is like a big point for me. It's sort of like that is a physical difference. Hi, Kitty.
she
That's
wants
that's the big point, right?
Yeah. So I have this is a little different because it's reading related,
sorry.
but there's a sign like on one of the walls in my community college that I go to that, and it says in alternating lines of English and French, that moment when you realize you're thinking in two languages at once.
Right.
And like the first time I read that, because like I took French
Some
in middle
French.
school and high school for like 6 years, I think. That like I read it fine, and it's like, oh wait, that was two different languages. Like I didn't notice immediately that like two languages were going on there. So like I could see like Dalinar, who isn't used to having multiple languages, I think, not picking up on the fact that he's speaking multiple languages. 'Cause,
Sure.
like,
I think that's definitely possible.
One of the things I'm really curious about, not just whether or not you could like feel different consonants and vowels as you're saying them, but when you lose the connection and go back, one moment, hey, cut that out. Sorry, she's playing with the blinds. When you go back to your old language, would you have muscle memory of what that language felt like? And I'm thinking if I were to, suddenly connect to a language like Ngosa, which I probably said that wrong because I'm not used to a language that has clicks in it.
Sure.
But obviously,
Comment below.
Yeah, if you're a Ngosa speaker,
If you speak this language,
yes, that would be great. But obviously, I'd immediately feel comfortable using clicks in words as a normal consonant. That'd be a normal mouth feel for me.
right.
But if I went back and then later tried to learn that language, would I still feel a little more comfortable with making those mouth sounds than I would have if I hadn't had that connection experience? Or is it just gone?
I have a couple questions, but I'll let Ian go first.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think so.
Mhm.
I
Because
agree.
it's like you are like altering your spirit web, and then that change is reverting. However, investiture over time can change your spirit web.
Now,
That's
If
my
you are
point.
constantly accessing this new connection, would it create something in your spirit web that would allow you to more easily acquire that language?
My question was less on the investiture, but it was the exact same idea of like
Fantastic.
how long does it take to build muscle memory? If you're doing this for like an hour every now and then, I would say definitely not. If you're doing this for hours every single day, maybe.
If you were Dalinar and you lived in Azir and you were constantly doing that in Azir.
Maybe.
yeah, I think you'd have to do it for a while before
Maybe.
you got muscle memory. Before it
In which
felt
case, you might as well just be learning the language.
because like one of the things that I think about is like the English R is really weird linguistically. It doesn't show up in hardly
Many
any
languages.
other languages. It's very weird. It's very hard for non-native speakers to pronounce because there's nothing really like it.
He's nodding.
Yeah. I'm
Can
kidding.
you
You probably testify.
I
Yeah.
don't mean to get off topic, but I'm very curious as to why the English R is weird. Just
It's a liquid, which English has two, technically three, because we have two L's, but we think of them as the same. That's another weird thing. And liquids are
I have so many questions already.
yeah. There you go.
is where
So
we take
a
the
liquid is
questions one-on-one.
basically it's a sound that's technically a consonant, but it acts almost like a vowel. And you can hold out something like in the way that you couldn't. It's more of a mouth position that you say a vowel through. Usually, is what an R actually is, and the mouth position for the English R it just doesn't happen in a lot of other places. You get tapped R's, you get trilled R's, you get R's that are farther back, but the one that we actually use as English speakers,
Interesting.
it just doesn't happen in very many languages. So
Yeah.
Because I knew
That-
yeah.
That was like English receiver versus French reservoir. Like I can like it's weird
Oh,
how I
yeah.
can like see
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
difference.
Because I knew that Japanese R's and L's are the same.
Korean, I believe it depends on where it is in the word. Like it's an R if it's at the beginning of a character and it's an L at the end, and they think of it as the same sound, but they are saying something different. Which we
Like
do in English
all
too.
of
We
our
have
vowels. All
There's
of our
two
vowels are basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
anyway.
there's two different
Hate
kinds
your
of
vowels.
L's. There's dark L's and I don't know if they're light L's.
L.
The
love.
light
and wood
Yeah.
wood elves and star elves.
Lol.
Exactly.
Okay. I need an example of these different L's.
Yeah, please.
Or
Is it like-
hold up. Let me look it up. Someone else.
Is
can
it
talk
like-
about
is
I'll
it like
find L
lol?
examples.
Hey, do you want me to throw something in here that like totally messes up our whole discussion?
Yeah, you please.
Okay, so in Oathbringer, chapter 117.
Uh-huh.
Good
First of all, let me ask you guys a question. At the end of
Oh, boy.
Oathbringer, does Dalinar speak Ashish?
Like, what do you mean? Does
Dalinar speak Ashish? Can he fluently carry on a conversation with someone?
If
without
he-
connection? No.
When's the last time he touched an Azish person?
Sure, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
why is this?
Where are you
Okay.
going with this?
Yeah.
Does anyone remember him using connection in like the Battle of Thelena Fields?
Not
He was
explicitly, no.
mostly
It's
just
been
talking
too
with
long.
Odium, and Odium can talk however he wants.
Okay, maybe one of our readers knows that he definitely does do this because in chapter 117, Dalinar talks to Lift and Ashish, and there's no mention of him in connection with her.
I mean,
Well-
that could have just happened off screen. Like that's
Yeah. And it does last several days.
Days.
Yep.
Yeah. Brandon said
I'll accept this.
yeah. Okay, I have L examples.
Great.
Give us L examples.
So it's
Not
usually-
language in the Cosmere, just learning about English. Yay.
There you go,
fun.
yeah.
It's such a messed up language.
It is
so-
really weird. I'm so sorry for anyone learning English. This is the worst. I'm
so
sorry,
terrible.
Evgeni.
the L that happens at the beginning of a syllable is the clear L. And that's things like leaf or black or lose. And then the dark L usually happens at the end of a syllable, like pool or milk or full.
You could have just said lol and be done with this.
Yeah. And so the word
Oh,
word lull,
yeah.
like lulling people to sleep, has both L's in it. One is a little farther forward, and the other one is back and raised at the end.
Huh.
Versus
Can't tell the
ugh.
difference.
Versus ol.
They
But if someone said it wrong, if someone said, I can't even do it, lull, lull, you'd be like, that doesn't sound right. Lull. That's wrong. You say lull.
Yeah, I can see a slight
Oh.
difference, though I cannot replicate what you're doing, but I can sense
Yeah.
there's a slight difference.
See, this is extremely obvious to me. It also has the same thing, and when I was very young, I struggled with the latter of those.
Interesting.
Like oftentimes, I would pronounce it close to a vowel. It would be, depending on the word, something between u and
Mhm.
I'm still not perfect at that, but I was gonna bring up the R's earlier as well.
Yeah.
'Cause they're
Tough.
Awful, right?
one they're awful, and it's also the example I thought of as you were talking about, or just before you were talking about languages with clicks,
Mhm.
Right.
because English R versus all the other languages that have a very, very hard kind of rolling, well,
Right.
rrr.
Mhm.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I have been learning Chinese, and Chinese has R's, but they're not English R's, and I don't know how to say them. I can't hear them very well. I can't say them very well, and so that's another question: is if I were, Dalinar, if Dalinar had taken, Intro to Azish 1 and 2 and knew how to ask how do you go, where's the bathroom, and do you, where
Where is
please
the
direct me,
baño?
please, where is the library, the basic phrases. How
Which
would
form
that
do I
change
need?
his experience with connection? Would he be able to recognize the things that he'd learned as, oh, I actually knew that before I knew connection, but now I can feel how it sounds now?
That I think I do agree with. If he took Azish 1 and 2, I think he would be. Yes.
I think if you learned it, I think that would be the difference between Evgeni speaking English as he does now,
Mhm.
and then if you also used connection. I'm not sure it would even use the same parts of the brain, because
That's possible.
native speaker part of the brain.
Possibly not. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would also probably be the difference between somebody maybe like Hoyd, who puts at least a little bit of effort into learning like the fundamentals of the language. He's just
True.
then going to power through with connection.
Because I think he can actually speak a lot of the languages that he's using connection for, but he's not going to sound like a native.
Yeah.
He needs to sound like a native. So instead of using his language learning, he'll use connection instead. And then he doesn't use his language. He uses the connection magic. That's my takeaway from everything that we've been told about how he uses it.
Yeah. I feel like if you're conscious enough of how the language works, that you could get it with, like, if you had intro to Azish, if you could then use that while you were speaking under connection, I think linguistic knowledge and linguistic training, grammar training, could sub in for that introductory little bit that you need to like latch onto. I think if you can do it with an intro to the language, I think you could do it with linguistic knowledge.
You
and
know,
break it
what's
down a
curious
little bit
to
in my
me.
head.
What's curious to me about it is that Brandon doesn't say he's learning it by using connection.
No, I don't
does
think
not.
you could learn the language just on connection.
He's using the language, but he's not learning the language.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's my takeaway. He's lived long enough. I think if it was possible, he could. We don't know if the connection helps or not, is basically the bottom line.
I'm just like hung up on the like, what if you use connection to speak a language you already know?
Yeah.
That you learned. Like what
Yep.
would actually happen?
That's what
there?
I
Like,
think about all the time.
grammatically, like
As someone who's
if,
like studying language, I'm like, I wish I could just connect and figure out what this R sound feels like in my mouth.
because like
if
if in your history like you are a native English speaker and you learn Bulgarian, if you use connection to rewrite your spirit web so that you're a native Bulgarian speaker, like you can't like you automatically become someone that learned English. Like would it
Wait.
just flip?
Oh, that's weird.
Would you
Wait.
retain your original native language? You mean?
I need a flowchart.
Well,
real
not
quick.
as a native language. It would be like
Oh
you
yeah,
would-
that idea. Oh, I see
'cause
what you're
it's like-
saying.
you
I
can't
don't.
learn your
I-
own language as a second speaker.
you
as a second
can't,
language.
because I don't think it works that way. Hold on, let me look for this wob. So if you've learned another language and Dalinar shakes your hand and activates his connection ability, he will connect not to the language you've learned, but to your native language.
That's not what I'm saying.
No,
It's
yeah.
like,
Yeah, but it's sort of like, just
What are you saying, Ian?
I would
Okay.
like to understand what Ian is saying.
Yeah.
first
I
before-
don't understand what Ian's saying at all.
okay.
okay, so it's I know English.
Yes.
Mhm.
If I learned French, I would be a native speaker of English and be a non-native speaker of French.
Sure.
If I use connection and become a native speaker of
Do they
French,
flip?
do they flip?
No.
Yeah.
Because
like
it's like so then like in this, according to my spirit web, I never learned a second language because
Yeah.
like in original world, okay.
I think that, well, so part of that does depend on how we are accessing connection, and that I think that's a
That's
very
true.
important distinction. If
I
we
think
are
if you were using a medallion, I think that might be possible.
Yeah.
Because the medallion connections it does to a place, and the way we see Alyx using it, the way he successfully uses it with an accent, and he describes a situation that he's from that explains it. I think that might be possible. Maybe. Just
Yeah, there
yeah, the medallions, you have an
Yeah.
accent, and the other
Right.
you don't.
it's not
That's-
because you have to have an accent with medallions, but it's because that the situation that Alyx connected to was with people who had moved in and learned the language, so it was accented, whatever the language is called.
Yeah, because it's interesting. Alyx definitely talks about it being he's connecting to a place. That when you just have blank connection and you activate it, it latches onto the place. Whereas Dalinar, we know, specifically connects to people and inherits their specific language. So I don't know. Maybe if Dalinar did just connect to a place rather than with a person, maybe he would have an accent because I don't.
He would have an accent. He's speaking with the accent of that person.
Right.
So someone from a different part of Azamir or
If he went to
Azir.
like a quarter of the city where the immigrants lived,
Mhm.
and he activated it, then maybe he would have their accented Asish.
One of the things that would really interest me is to see a character like Alista do
Yes.
connect.
Yes.
To something,
Yeah.
and how she would react. I feel like
Yes.
that would answer so
A
many of our
scholar, an
Just like
actual scholar.
Any person
yeah,
who like
language
really thinks
scholar
about this.
specifically.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a while till Hoyd. Alyssa's probably the better.
And if there's anybody going to a signing, that might be the way to phrase it. Like, if Alista used connection to gain another language, would she react? Hi, Dalish.
Even
Ask Brandon.
don't be specific. Even just ask someone who's trained in
Yeah.
in languages, because like
Answer this question. We're all very curious.
So there's a relatively recent WoB, I think. This might be from Jordan Con last year because I'm currently going through and reviewing that.
That's
Argent.
relatively recent.
Mhm.
it's relatively recent.
Yeah, and it's that the medallions that we are seeing the Southerner use are Brandon's, like, these are like super primitive
Right.
applications of connection. It's like these are like the future of the Cosmere. It's like it's going to be so much better, and it's like might be that super high tech connection medallions like do allow you to learn a language faster.
Absolutely.
But we're just not there yet.
Right.
Or it could look exactly like Dalinar's using it. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I presume Dalinar's method of using it is the best version.
Yeah.
I would disagree.
I think Hoyd is the best version. I do think Dalinar's is way more advanced than any other besides Hoyd.
Yeah, it's
I still don't agree with how you think Hoyd learns, but
yeah,
Not with how he learns, but how he uses connection magic. His use of connection magic is the most advanced.
I think that the human like magic system applications of connection are on a certain level. The connection medallions are significantly below that.
Way
but
below.
like end of the Cosmere, era 4, like that technology is going to eventually surpass what you can do with a magic system. Through just
That
raw
seems likely.
manipulation of investiture, like an understanding of how realmatics
I guess that's true.
works.
I guess that's true. Okay.
Oh, Era 4. We have so many ideas.
Oh, Era 4. Give it to me.
You could probably have a universal translator.
Sure, yeah. And because like I do think about this all the time, but just in a different way. It's sort of like if I'm singing a song, one of my songs, and it's an English song, and then like Dalinar shakes my hand, and so I'm singing in Alethi now. Will I even notice the difference in cadence, difference in rhythm? If the English song is playing and I'm singing along with it, will I be singing in Alethi or will I be singing in English? It's one of those things that like I think about all the time, and that's the way I would phrase the question to Brandon. Question number 2 in this is sort of like, if you have this level of consciousness of like I'm singing in English right now, how will that translate at all? How will that translate? Will I be aware of it? That's essentially that's my version of this. I think time is like how aware will we even be?
Yeah, songs are messy, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because when you're singing
No,
along with something, it's rigid. You know if you're offbeat. I feel like I would notice if my words were off, if the sentence structure, the rhythm of the song is going to be totally different, right?
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
it would be easier to notice if I'm singing something different from the song, right? That would be I feel like maybe I wouldn't. Maybe the connection would just be that strong.
The other interesting thing is, for songs that have been translated, would you immediately start singing the translation? I'm thinking like biblical hymns often have lyrics in many different languages that fit the beat. Like with the connection, would you just immediately like latch onto like their version of Amazing Grace and just sing that one, even though
Or
it's
would it
saying
be,
different
like-
things?
a verbatim translation of what the English is.
Yeah.
That songs, that kind of reminds me of Hoyd's intent to pun. Like
Yeah.
you intend to have a line in a song that means this, but it doesn't have to be exactly this.
It
But
has to do this. It has to rhyme.
And it has to fit the rhythm, right? And
Yeah.
evoke this emotion.
Yeah,
evoke
so it's
the
sort of
that-
like it's
rhythm,
so much
feel
more
the rhyme.
complicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Languages are
So it might
complex. Yeah.
it might be more akin to, you know, how certain Disney songs get translated
Mhm.
with intent and meaning
Yeah.
in a bunch of different languages. Let It Go, massive example.
I can sing "Let It Go" in French. I love it.
And you can sing that to the rhythm and music of the original.
Mhm.
And so can, you know, all the other translations. I would imagine that's closer to what's happening if you were to tap connection like halfway through a song or something.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it would have to be on Hoyd's level of the intent rather than the actual words. You would have to be able to do it that
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
You know, the thing that I just thought of is someone translating a song. There's some level where you choose, no, I'm going to put this word here. I'm going to put
Yep.
this word here. And I have decided that this fits the meaning well enough, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But if you're magically translating it, maybe you could discern the difference of someone using a connection magic, because the magic is not necessarily going to do what that person chose to translate the song as.
I know. I think about that
Yeah.
all the time. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh man, like maybe the connection is just like on the fly. It's just trying to. It's only going as far as your thought. Like maybe you only have the next line in mind, but then it doesn't keep in whole. If you're translating it yourself, knowing the language, you would be
Yeah.
like, you would be doing it the whole song at the time. You'd be like this.
There would be differences.
There would be so many differences.
Yes,
So this
I
is
feel.
difference between someone like the artist, the whoever translated "Let It Go" into French and
Mhm.
the version that Alex knows,
Yeah.
versus using something like Google Translate. Because like there are songs where they've put it into Google Translate like 3 times and then like try to sing it back when it gets translated.
Oh, yeah,
back in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
That
just
would be
like,
the medallion. Google
not
Translate.
that
is
that
not-
would
Well-
be the medallion.
Well, I don't think the medallions are that bad. Like, I feel
Yeah,
like
they're better than that.
I feel
Yeah,
like
they're
the
probably better.
medallion, or, well, I guess I'm thinking more of the Dalinar spiritual adhesion. But if Dalinar was singing with spiritual adhesion, it would be pretty good. It wouldn't be the same words necessarily, but it would.
Yeah.
Mhm.
the same idea, the same
Yeah,
theme.
it would feel
Yeah.
like the same
Yeah.
song. But it
Let
wouldn't.
me-
If you wrote down the words, they would not be necessarily the exact same words.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
actually done some of this. I have covered K-pop songs actually, where I did I did English lyrics for them, and there was very much an intent of, there's a lot of people that really try to preserve the verbatim words as much as possible when they do English covers. And I thought, if I were sitting down to write this song as an English speaker, what would I make the lyrics? And I feel like Connection's going to give you something more like that,
Yes.
where you're going to get the theme and the feel of the song and the
Yes.
message
The
without
native language,
the
what's
same
natural, what sounds good in the native
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
And
This is interesting.
So speaking of Disney songs in different languages, there is a one of my favorites. I learned a lot of Disney songs when studying French because their translations are actually very good. And they make sense and they sound good. A lot of them feel weird when you get like amateur stuff.
Yeah. Well,
And
honestly.
there was in The Lion King, the French makes a visual pun that English does not, and I don't know why. There's a point in Be Prepared from The Lion King, which Scar sings. In French, he uses the phrase exécuter mes ordres, which is to execute my orders. But it's the same pun that we could use in English, and Scar like goes across his throat. The English lyric has no kind of pun there. He just like goes across his throat for no reason. And I'm like, what?
Really?
That pun exists in English. You could have used it.
Yeah.
And
Huh.
apparently
I
a lot
find
of
the
foreign
French
languages,
translations are
the
really
pun
good,
there for that.
actually.
Yeah, the French ones are great. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why does the English lyric not have an execute pun there? That's perfect.
Maybe because
Yeah.
the translators just saw the finished like thing, and then they're like trying to maybe fit it better. Whereas I don't know, like that's.
I think they take it They take it real seriously, and it's
Oh,
great
yeah.
that they have the whole. They know the theme of the song. They know what it's trying to convey about like
Mhm.
Scar is going to be king, and
Yeah.
you know, it was sort of like in the same. Like I know, like the Be Our Guest in from Beauty and the Beast. You know, like the French version of that. It was sort of like there were a lot of like food puns and all like kitchen
That's so
etc. puns.
that's really
But they were
funny.
like there were
Mhm.
ones that they just skipped because they don't translate, and then there were lots of new ones that like a lot of different French puns that were also just
Right.
as funny for the.
Well,
it was
right,
just
yeah.
like
You can't translate the literal thing, right?
Yeah, that's why you have translators for books, and you don't just find it through Google Translate.
Right.
Very true.
How
Um,
successful those are is a different topic.
I mean,
Here's the thing.
translations. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um, when speaking of songs and poems and things like that in general, I would like to remind everyone that in the spiritual realm,
oh no, you've lost me already.
all places and times are one,
That's right.
and so you don't need to translate your song line by line. Connection automatically knows the full meaning of the thing you're
right.
translating, and so it can adapt to that.
It
You are
already.
connecting to the. You're
Yeah.
connecting to the spiritual ideal of the song.
No,
Of
to
this
be fair, that's
line,
true.
this word play, what this evokes in
Oh,
someone, and we're going to translate the intent of this song
The-
into the.
The
You get it for
song
free.
was written this way because it will have been translated to mean this. It always will have been this.
Cosmere is weird.
Kaladin is good with a sphere because he will be good with a sphere. It makes
Cosmere.
sense.
That's not quite
So
a
weird.
tautology, but it's kind of a tautology.
But yeah, everything's
Because
connected in the
it is.
spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for that input, Evgeni. That was perfect.
Goodness,
Alyx is just like, I'm so zoned out.
I hate romantics. God,
I
I can't believe
spaced
y'all
out
got
after
me
the
talking
word around.
romantics.
I mean, we are kind of
So
talking romantics,
frustrating.
though. But
I
you're
know.
you're talking less on the abstract romantic level and more the very
That's
practical language level.
Very true, and I'm good at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing about songs, real quick.
Yes.
I'm thinking of the Dragon Age Inquisition tavern songs, which
Okay.
all have both an English and a French version, depending on whether you're in Ferelden when you hear them or Orlais. They swap them. but
Oh, that's
fake-
really cool.
there's fake England and fake France in Dragon Age.
Right, yeah,
And-
right.
As a person who speaks both language, I would bet money they were written in French first, because the French versions, the rhyme scheme is better. And in English, you sometimes get like words that are accented on the wrong beat. And,
BioWare Montreal, folks.
and so I'm pretty sure like that's one of those things where I can almost tell like, wait, the French version feels a bit more natural. Like I wonder if you would get a little of that from Connection, like this is a valid English song, but it feels a little off.
I'm so glad I played Dragon Age Origins. Like, oh yeah, that's right. Orlais is fake French.
Orlais is great. Fun fact, I because I'm a nerd, I downloaded the French voice packs. They don't say Orlais when they're speaking French.
What do they say?
Orlais, and they pronounce the S.
What?
Don't know why.
What?
They have an accent over the I to make sure you pronounce the S at the end. Orlais.
That's like saying Kelsier instead of Kelsier.
It's weird. I don't know. Dragon Age is weird,
Thank
but
you.
I love it a lot.
I never played Inquisition. Final thoughts, guys. This was a fun talk. I don't know if we've come to no decisions, but hopefully if you're listening, you will now have thought about the weirdness that is involved.
So the only thing I can think of is that my only real exposure to the tavern songs from Dragon Age is one of the songs that Feather covered like years and years and years ago.
Did I cover one of those?
Yeah,
I don't remember that.
The Dawn Will Come. You covered it in French.
Oh, that was okay.
Which
That's a
I don't.
funny
That's probably
story.
not a tavern song, but that.
So that one, it's not a tavern song. It doesn't
Okay.
have a French version, but when you play the French
Oh.
when you play with French subtitles, they wrote lyrics that work
They
in
just
French
didn't
that are
sing it.
French.
Okay.
They just didn't do a song cover of it. Yeah.
Welcome to the
So-
Dragon
and I-
Age podcast.
Welcome.
You can tell I have not played Dragon Age Inquisition.
I haven't either, but will the Darkspawn come back in Dragon Age 4? I would really like to know because I'd play that game. Anyway,
Oh,
Our
I know.
end result was that we have a lot of opinions and we want more info. That's
Yes.
the bottom line.
I think it really comes down to how much, when you're using spiritual adhesion, how much you can perceive the language. Because I just don't think you can at all. But I can understand your guys' perspective that maybe if you were trained, you could notice.
Like, maybe you still think
Depends.
you're speaking Alethi and you're only getting a Lethi sentence structure in your head.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what other people think about this. And I
Yes.
wonder if it falls on the same lines of, because I think Eric and Gray do not have as much exposure with foreign languages.
I
Um,
took some
I-
Spanish and I took 2 semesters of Japanese. I've forgotten basically all of it. But I do know biblioteca is library.
But I wonder if
It
it's
is
going to
also banned
fall
in
on
Bulgaria.
similar
Oh,
lines.
really?
People who are multilingual will
Yes.
feel more one way, and people who are who don't have as
Mo-
like a
The
full
word
foreign
is
language experience.
monolingual.
I know.
I
It
wonder-
felt mean.
I wonder how connecting with people would affect like many Californians who live in bilingual homes in
Yeah.
English and Spanish, and like how does
Yeah,
that work?
like,
It's really interesting.
What if you do have more than one native language, so to speak?
Well, right, yeah, and that's
If you were raised with two,
yeah.
maybe.
We could
Oh,
we
yeah.
could see that from Shalon possibly. She seems to speak Alethi near natively, but she's not a native Alethi speaker. She speaks
I think
Fezzi,
she
her native
learned.
language. So
I think she learned most of it because
Yeah.
they're very similar.
Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
like Spanish and Italian?
Probably more like that.
probably closer to that. Yeah.
Or Spanish and Portuguese.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the
Yeah,
one.
maybe.
Yeah.
But yes, when you tell us your like when you comment what you think about it, tell us if you speak any other languages. I'm
Yeah.
curious if there's a connection
Divide there.
there.
If you're if you
Ah,
were raised bilingually, we want to hear your
yes,
comments
someone
below.
especially if you
Or
feel you're
def-
native.
tell us what
in more than
languages
one
you
language.
speak.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
definitely. Ah,
Yes.
yeah, it's too bad none of my students here read Cosmere because I definitely have students who are just like totally bilingual, raised bilingual. It's like
Perfect.
only you read the Stormlight Archive, then we could have a good conversation about this.
If only you knew
No.
what connection was, and then we could pull you.
Yes,
I'm gonna call someone out specifically. I'm curious what Botanica thinks about.
that's
this
true. I was just
topic.
thinking about
Because Botanica not only speaks multiple languages, but
does
is a
translation.
translator of the Cosmere.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Or she helps translate the Chinese versions. So
If you have time, we
Monica, if
would
you're
love to hear from you. Boda.
Yeah.
if you
Should have
have,
just
I mean,
gotten her.
Do
on
we
this
do we even
podcast.
know if she?
I
listens?
think it's
Yeah.
really late.
I don't think she
in
listens to the
China,
podcast.
right? Yeah. So
But Botanica's great. You've seen her art. I
She's
guarantee
wonderful,
it.
yes.
If you've seen
She's
any
good at
fan art, you've seen
everything.
her art.
She
It's
did a
difficult
series of
enough.
Dalinar, and it was amazing.
so
Well,
Here's
Yes?
here's an interesting WAB that we didn't talk about.
yes.
Mhm.
We should. Sign language.
Oh, yes, that is
that's
true.
a good point.
That's true. There were a few of these, and
There were
here.
2 WOBs about sign language,
you can
Where
which
there's
is pretty interesting.
you can use a connection medallion for sign language, which is very interesting to. What would that look like? What would you perceive?
Yeah.
What would you not?
We really want to know what the user of connection perceives, and that's what we kind of don't have.
That's Agreed.
Yeah.
Cool.
Interesting.
Cool.
Well,
So weird.
it
I'll
is.
definitely be paying a lot of
You-
attention to this.
I mean,
once it
you'll probably be making the motions, appropriate motions for whatever sign language you're picking up, and I guess in your head, those motions are just like these are how this is how you sign,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then when you lose the connection, I I guess your brain is gonna go back to, well, this is how you sign, and this is how you've always signed. It feels like there has to be some kind of memory override going on.
Yeah.
Something.
I think it's just like hacking your brain. It's a legit brain hack through the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
Spiritual mumbo jumbo, very powerful in the Cosmere. It's the more powerful than Ada Nelsium is spiritual mumbo jumbo, actually.
Put a
Probably
new
true.
mental OS. You switch from Windows to Mac, and it just feels right. You've always
Yeah.
been on a Mac.
Yeah.
And then you go back,
Yeah.
and oh yeah, we're back on Windows. It's fine. Everything's the same.
Connect
And
with
me
a
and
Mac
Alex
user.
just kept talking about it all this week, and we're like, no, we have to save this conversation.
I know.
Don't get into
Trust me, that is
like
the
playing Destiny, and like okay, but really connection. That
that is some of the most difficult thing about the podcast is that we just want to
Yeah.
blab about a thing, and then it's like,
Right.
wait, we need to save it. I think this happened on the Lord Ruler podcast where Ian had to like go AFK for a second, and Ben and I are just going at it, and it's like, no, we gotta wait for us to
This
be
is
back
good
on air.
stuff. This is
Ah!
good stuff. Let's save it.
save
Yeah.
the content.
It's difficult.
And it happens all the time, like when we're just chatting in one of the chat channels or whatever.
Yeah.
We'd come up with a good idea, we'd get excited about it, and we're like, we should do a podcast on that. And then we're
That's
like,
true.
yeah, we should. And then we continue talking. And then it's like, but
And then we
we're-
get an episode like the Half Shard one where the conversation already existed and we're just recounting the conversation, and that maybe didn't work out super great. But guys, you know what time it is? It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character?
This character is from Roshar.
Menace.
Tien, Tom,
Raise.
Void in drag on a horse.
It's time for Who's That Cosmere Character? Caw. Alright, guys. You know the game. You send 5 clues and a character to wtcc at 17shard.com. It's in the description below. And eventually, when we get through these, we will say them. And our guests need to guess a character on each clue, and if they get it right, they are the winners and get all the pride and glory, and that's usually Ian. So, statistically speaking. So this first one is from Mesa.
Misa.
Oh,
Hi.
yes.
It's great.
Yes. Oh, this one. Wow, this one was even sent in 2019. We're doing good, guys.
Oh, wow.
Hell yeah.
Wow. Nice.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Excellent.
I don't know who that is, but thank you for the
It's
Yeah.
question.
Fafsa. You know who it is. It's Fafsa.
Oh.
Misa.
Yeah. We just still call her Misa. That's all.
I
It
do.
used to be her name.
Before she changed her username on Discord.
Because-
Come in Discord, guys.
Is
and-
it
Yeah, we have
Misa
fun.
or is it Maisa?
That's a great question, and
That's
she
a great
can go
linguistic
comment below.
question.
There's an accent mark on the I, and I don't know Portuguese. I do not speak that language.
I
Sorry, you're
think-
just
doesn't
hearing
it-
us speak with the Western English.
Doesn't it
accent.
abbreviate to Issa or like a nickname?
You were asking the exact
I
wrong
do
people for
not
that.
know.
I'm not talking
sure.
to you people. I'm speaking to her through time. in the
Oh,
spirit
okay.
channel.
To the
I'm
audience.
sorry if you are Portuguese listening.
We're so sorry.
Clue 1, this character isn't human.
Frost.
Great.
No, not Frost.
Arklow.
It's not Arklow.
Didn't she talk about sending a character?
You can't do that. No metagaming.
Hey, look,
Metagame this.
look, I remember, you know the one we did a while ago that was from Ambition's Avatar? She made art of Gallant, and I was like, if only I just remembered what people did on the Coppermind when people send things in. This would be so much easier.
Yeah, that's the only.
But
the
I don't
third
know
time
if
you've made that joke.
Misa's done any Coppermind stuff. I've been trying to get her to do that, but
Okay. Sweet.
Well, since I know that Misa has a very cute dog, I'm going to guess the dog Tensoon.
no, it is not Tensoon.
Good guess.
That is a good
It
guess,
is a
though.
guess.
I will then.
There's another dog.
Scrack.
It is not Scrack.
Don't know who that is.
Oh,
Is it
The other
Scrag?
yeah.
Is it Sakisa? I remember that. That was amazing.
Scrag is the axe hound. The,
Yes, yes.
The Devar's axe hound?
Yeah,
I
There's
think?
two
Yeah, he's a puppy.
Devar axons actually.
Oh
There
wow.
were, yeah.
There was one where someone
Don't
sent
remember that.
in Wickham's axe hound, and people were guessing Balat's axe
Yeah.
hound. It was
Oh
great.
no.
These books are terrible.
Yeah. Clue 2. This is Clue 2. This character is from Roshar. Very
Ha.
helpful, I know.
I was
Is
righter than most of you.
Is it Stick?
No, it is not Stick.
Okay.
He's from the
Uh,
Daredevil universe. That's not the same.
Ooh.
Stick is human in the Daredevil universe.
That's true.
Sureblood.
No, it is not Sureblood. What are all
I
the
will
pets in the cause?
I will be on brand and vote Gliss.
It is not Gliss.
Oh
That
yes,
is-
Bren. Oh.
Spren aren't human.
They are
Technically,
not.
You know,
The Parshendi are not human either, so all the Parshendi characters are fair game.
Yeah, I was trying to guess a fused, and I forgot all of their names.
All of them?
There's the lady
Uh,
with an L name.
Lady
It's
Leshmi.
about
But is it a
Yeah.
clear L or a
Leshwi.
dark L?
Deck L.
Or a
It's dark
wood
L.
L?
Wood Star Elves.
That was hilarious. Oh, it is not Leshmi, by the way.
Okay, good to know.
Clue 3. This character is a listener.
Oh, there we
Ken.
No.
Is this a trick question?
No, Ken is the other one. Never mind. God.
go. That's true.
Ken is not a singer.
I
Oh,
wanna
Ken's a
guess-
singer, not a listener.
I
Thank
wanna
you,
guess
that's
one of
the-
the 5.
Oh, yeah, that's
I don't
true.
remember any.
I was like, oh shoot, they're not the same thing.
Okay.
No.
I am going to guess the sleepless that Hoyt is talking to at the end of Words of Radiance.
The sleep.
Oh.
Sleepless?
Yes.
Terrible.
He's making a pun on the word listener.
Yes.
That's the sleepless is listening. It is
Oh
not.
my goodness.
That's
Okay.
very cute, but no.
Capital L listener.
It is
I-
capital L listener, but actually you don't actually capitalize the word listener, so that doesn't actually help.
Oh, okay.
It
Well,
just-
does
you-
help because we
No.
know what it means,
Yeah,
but
but
it's incorrect.
it is
It's
an incorrect
incorrect.
calculation.
but we know what they
Capitalization.
mean, so it's helpful.
Oh God, I don't
Demid.
remember.
No, it is not Demet.
I can't remember anybody. Somebody go basic and say Relaine.
No, it is not Relaine. Clue 4. This character is a leader.
Has anyone
Right.
said any of the 2 girls?
It's one of the 5.
It is one of
know
the
it's
5,
One
yeah.
of the 5.
And it's obviously not gonna be it, but I'll guess Eshonai,
No, it's not Eshonai.
Yeah.
just to give you all fewer options.
I'll cross Venley off the list.
It is not Venley.
Okay.
I'm going to guess the one of the 5 that was in mate form, but I don't remember his name. And that's my guess. And if it's correct, it doesn't fully count, but that's where I'm gonna throw. It's not a real guess, but that's all I got. You don't have to say yes or no because it doesn't count.
Ian.
I'm going to guess the listener who was in Dull Farm, whose name I don't remember.
Ah.
One in mate form, one in dull form.
I mean,
here's
so-
the
so
thing.
here's-
Here's the thing, guys.
Oh,
Clue
they
5 is this character was in dull form.
I'm like, I
Oh,
don't remember
Ian
her
got
name,
it.
so
It was Ian.
What's the
That's
character's
really
name?
funny.
What's the character's
Half
name?
credit.
I don't know.
I know.
Yeah,
I
the
don't
pro-
remember
like-
either.
When you say the member of the 5 who is in dough form, like that uniquely identifies
It
the
does.
character
All right,
beyond.
fine. Yeah, you're right.
Dal.
You're right. You're right.
But it's also like,
the character's name is Zoln.
sure it is.
Okay.
Never would have remembered it.
Yeah, no.
Nope.
Too long. Need to read Words of Radiance more. Need to read Oathbringer again. First.
Oh, Maisie stumped us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well,
Thanks,
I
girl.
mean,
Half
you did
some.
uniquely identify it. So we've done that before.
Yeah.
It's kind of an esoteric one.
It's a
Those
good
are the
one.
best ones, though.
This next one is
Mhm.
sent in by Harold Metz. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you,
Clue
Harold.
1. This
Herald
character...
of the Almighty.
Not that kind of Harold. Clue 1. This character is the child of a political leader.
Shalash.
No, I like that one.
That's
That's
a good
good.
Are you
I cho-
technically the child of someone if you're not born yet?
In the spiritual realm.
I
feel like that's more-
They always will have been born.
That's a more political question than we want to get into.
That's true.
Oh,
I'm going to
no.
guess
Oh, no.
Serini and Rodin's unborn child that sort of shows up at the end of Hope of Elantris because Serini is pregnant.
How are you gonna come up with 5 clues about this character?
I don't know, but
no, it is
that's
not that
instantly
one.
what popped into my brain. So I'm gonna
So
guess
Look,
it.
it's clue one. It's
Funny.
fine.
That's so funny.
I am going to guess Fafin.
No. Ooh, that's a good one. Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah.
An
Baffin.
exotic guess.
Mm.
How dare you not go to Roshar?
How
right?
dare you not go to Roshar? I feel like we guessed the non-Roshar ones just to try and
Eliminate
Make
it
it-
out, and then it turns
make
out to
it
be
fair.
Roshar anyway.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
it's Renarin, I'm gonna like
I-
leave the call immediately.
Did you guess
It's a
already?
call.
No, I did, but I didn't do Renarin. And if
Mm.
I missed my obvious guess on the first one, I'll be upset.
Is
This
it
is what
is
I'm
it,
saying.
is it Renarin?
It is not Renarin.
Okay, I'm
that
saying
would have been really funny if that
the
was yes,
brand is
though.
protected.
The spiteful guess.
Clue 2. This character is the target of an assassination plot.
Is it? Oh.
Huh. Interesting.
Oh.
Almost.
A lend.
No.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
That was a
Good
good
one.
one.
Well, it is not gonna be a Sixth of the Dusk character.
No
Really?
It will
Oh.
probably not be the Emperor's Soul.
Assassination plot.
Governor Innate?
No, it is not Governor Innate.
I
Was
don't
he
know
the
if he was
child
the-
of a
I don't
political
know if he was-
leader? Maybe.
I
Maybe,
would-
but it's
It feels like it would be likely. but
the
I don't know
Innate
that they
family
were
tree
said.
is not clear.
Yeah.
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 The target. I feel like we're gonna get this one and just like scream.
Mm.
What does it mean to be a political leader?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be like a royal family or anything. Just-
Pedanticast, what is a political leader?
Yeah, right. Because Ashravan was like his father was the equivalent of a nobleman.
Mm.
Mhm.
So technically,
Mm.
No.
like,
So
I'm not
what
gonna
What was
guess
the
that,
second
but-
clue? What was the phrasing of this clue?
This character is the target of an assassination plot.
Oh.
What was the first clue? Again.
This character is the child of a political leader.
Okay. I couldn't remember if it was leader or figure, so
I have another obvious guess, but I've already guessed. And I want it to
Eerie.
be obscure.
Rira.
Yurira, Shinovar, Leah Forstein.
Oh my god. Hold on. I'm trying to remember political leaders. I'm just like I'm so far from where you guys are at.
I mean, yeah, we started in the west, in the east, in the west.
Yeah,
Target of a
that's where
assassination.
Frodo's from.
This is killing me. This is absolutely killing me. Is it Susebron?
No, it is not Susebron.
Okay.
Did you guys all guess?
Also, not the. No, I did not guess,
Okay.
and I am verily stumped.
have
Verily
a good
stumped.
one.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yes.
Have
You're
we
verily
said?
stumped.
No, I shouldn't say anything.
don't say anything.
That's right. That's how you give away things, Alex.
It's true.
You only do
What
that
if
on
it
clue
was
5
Renarin?
when it's
That's
when
gonna
it's hopeless.
haunt me.
What if it
That-
was
That
Renarin?
fear, that alternate timeline where it was, and I was just afraid of all of our listeners.
By the way, if you want to send in a Who's That Cosmere character where we require a specific cast member to be on, just put it in your
Oh.
email.
That's a
Uh,
good one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
See, this should be really easy because like all the Cosmere parents are dead
Or unnamed. That's two
or unnamed, right?
possibilities.
Yeah.
Or if you're
Uh,
Ellen, they just don't exist.
I guess I will guess Queen Aesidon.
It is not Queen Aesidon.
I do have another guess, but it's too obvious.
Clue
Same.
3.
I think we have
Same.
the same one.
This character's eyes change color when accessing investiture.
Oh.
Okay, so it's not Siri.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was not gonna guess
I mean,
Siri.
technically, she could change her
I was like, Siri fits it, but she's too obvious.
No, I was thinking the Lord Ruler.
Lord
I'm
Ruler
gonna-
isn't
I'm
a
gonna say
child.
that's
He's a nephew of a political leader.
Is it
That's a
Shalon?
misdirection clue.
Shalon is my guess. Is it
No.
Shalon?
I am doubling down on this is not a surge binder.
Just, I'm doubling.
Who else has eye color change stuff?
I don't know and I
Collection
don't
stuff.
care, but it's not gonna be a surge binder.
All right. I'm going
I
to double
am-
down on it as a search binder then, just to be
I am
obstinate.
reverse psychologying this question.
Changes color.
This is
I'm like,
my favorite one that I've done in a long time to say to you.
I'm like,
guys.
I have like the obvious ones that
Yeah.
though the last one is and then there's one where it's like, do they ever technically like what counts as an assassination target?
Does
I-
the assassination succeed? Does it fail?
I think
Is-
both
was?
would count.
What is
Yeah.
a political leader? What is an assassination plot? What does it mean to
Character.
access investiture?
Because I mean, arguably, Lyran is a political figure in Hearthstone.
It does say political leader, not figure. I will correct.
I
that.
know, but still, like,
Eh.
And was Lyran a
Also,
child?
Lyran?
no, the child would be Kaladin, whose
Oh.
eyes change when using investiture.
Oh, okay.
You could say Kaladin.
You could say Kaladin.
I don't feel like
But I
Kaladin's
can't
ever
think
been
of an assassination target.
I mean,
of
like,
someone.
Sidious tried to kill him a lot, but that wasn't like assassination. There's a
No.
difference. I have a really funny guess.
Oh, yeah?
I'm just gonna guess Elokar because his eyes
Yeah.
do change color.
His
in the
eyes
book,
change
does
color.
not do
To,
investiture.
to be honest, I'm surprised you didn't guess Elhokar in the last one. It is not Elhokar.
Yeah.
But
I
like,
was thinking him, but I mean, like, what are
Yeah.
you gonna?
child of a
I can't-
political leader and assassination plot. Elhokar.
But it wasn't a real assassination attempt. Is the thing.
They
No, it
stabbed him at
was.
the end of Words of Radiance.
Oh, I forgot
Moash,
Words of
yeah,
Radiance.
Moash and Graves, yeah.
That was a
whole-
very real
they had a
assassination
whole-
attempt.
I thought I was thinking about Way of Kings. I was like, he
Yeah.
faked it.
It was kind of a big deal.
I
Oh,
don't
just thought
remember
of
anything.
Another one. Okay,
Ooh,
I thought of another. But I've already guessed.
what are you doing?
It's not a surge binder.
It's not a.
It's not a search binder.
You believe in your heart of hearts.
Uh,
You've connected to this questioner, and you believe that it is not a search binder.
You've
Okay,
connected on
okay.
a spiritual level.
I'm getting Nalthus.
Okay. There are colors there.
There are colors there.
Well, that's tautologically true, but whatever.
Mm. It doesn't quite fit.
Uh-huh. It's better than Kaladin.
But it is better than guessing Kaladin, yes. Just so we can move things along, I'm gonna go with Vivenna.
It is not Vivenna.
That's who I was thinking when you started saying Nalthus. I'm like, oh, Vivenna.
Clue.
Okay, thank you.
Clue 4. This character likes to challenge authority.
Is it
Is it
Yasna?
Queen Fen's son?
No and no.
Oh, dang it. If
There's
it was
no
Yasna, that would have been funny because I stole it from Argent.
You stole it from Evgeni. That would be funny if it was
That would be
Yasna.
funny.
Spiteful.
She fits all the things so far.
She does. So many people try to kill her.
Challenges authority.
I've got nothing. I just threw that out there. I'm just like, I'm gone. This is.
This might have a bonus 6th clue if you can't get it on clue 5.
Still?
Oh.
No.
Okay.
Oh, that's a good
a
guess.
really good one.
Like, I don't
It's
know
not-
when your eyes
Her-
change
her
color,
eyes
but
don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly why I
Not-
discounted it.
Not a surge binder though.
Not a surge.
Technically.
Also,
Technically.
not exactly a political leader.
She's a princess.
Spreading politics.
Yeah, that
I
Yeah,
mean,
in
I
the
would say
Cognitive
she's the
realm
daughter
politics
of someone.
the Stormfather is a very important figure, leader.
in the cognitive realm. For
What
sure.
is politics?
What does it mean to be a leader?
What are birds?
What,
We
what are
just don't
chickens?
know.
What are chickens on Roshar?
I have a feeling this is like a singer or a listener.
Bless you, ants. Blends.
I will.
Evgeni again.
Oh
No, but he's not the son of.
Evgeni, just say something.
No, no, you're not my real dad. My real
That's
dad
true.
is a political leader.
This one is hard. I'm
Yes.
trying to think of what my next guess would be.
Yeah, no, I
I,
like
I
it,
don't
though.
have any
I
next
like it.
guesses.
I love
I'm waiting
Clue
for the
5.
next clue.
Clue
Yeah,
5 is
but-
incredible.
Oh, is it gonna tell us nothing?
No. It's very helpful.
Okay.
All right, screw it. Moesh.
No. Clue 5. This character is not in any of Brandon's published novels.
Oh my god, I haven't read any.
No.
unpublished-
You have to be very careful with that.
Say it again.
This character is not in any of Brandon's published novels. Think
You
about
should
what
edit
that's
in. You should edit in some cricket sounds.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, like I think I know what that means. I just want to say that out loud.
Oh.
Is this still a Cosmere character? Can you say
This
that?
is a Cosmere character.
Okay,
Because they use investiture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's this is very valid. This is an excellent Who's That Cosmere
Oh
character.
my god.
Kenton.
It is Kenton.
Kenton. Yeah. Cool.
When
So-
was I
Did his eyes change color?
Yeah, I was gonna try
Uh,
to guess a white sand character.
Maybe that's in the art that his eyes kind of glow, maybe a little bit.
That's not changing
Ah.
color.
Well,
Research
I mean,
break.
If you get a different eye shade,
that's changing.
that
hair color.
counts. Yeah.
Could be an art thing, but and
You wanna go look now.
Clue 6 would have been this character doesn't own a boombox.
That's good.
Excellent.
Aha.
Excellent work.
I
And
got it.
wasn't a surge binder.
Was not a surge binder. You're correct. That was a red herring clue.
Yeah, don't put clues from unpublished novels. But Kenton is in a published work, but it is not a novel.
They're called
Oh.
graphic novels.
Yeah,
I
I
was
was just
gonna
gonna
say
say they're
graphic
graphic novels.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's fair.
That's
fair.
what I was going to try to like. Okay, is a graphic novel a novel? And then I was like, you know what? No, I'm just gonna guess Kenton.
What is a
Why not?
political
Let's just
leader?
Go
What
for
is an assassination plot? What is a novel?
I was thinking novella and going to
Mm.
I was
Um,
thinking novella.
true,
Yeah.
novella.
Edge Dancer and like Arklow. It's like, but like he's not the offspring
And
of a
he's not
political
any
leader.
of those. Yeah.
He was a subject of a assassination attempt ish, and like his eyes do change color, or he has different bugs that have different eye colors.
That's not
Kenton-
using investiture though.
Kenton,
Yeah.
if you didn't know, is the protagonist of White Sand.
I would like to protest.
Okay.
There may be a scene where his eyes glow,
Mm-hmm.
but it is definitely not consistent.
Okay. All right.
I haven't. I went through
Are
a
you-
significant.
Are you
We're
saying the
appealing
art
the
in White
decision.
Sand is not consistent? Oh my god!
That's
Technically, would it change
a-
color just due to art changes? But while accessing investiture due to art changes.
I actually haven't looked through the second volume.
Oh
But in the first one, definitely not something that happens consistently.
Well, guys, thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you learned some fun and exciting things about languages. We actually realized that there were other things that we could talk about with language, but we focused on the language and connection. We can talk about other language and society stuff as things go on, because there's lots of fun things going on with languages. So we can always talk about that another time. And so follow us on 17shard.com for all your news, discussion, theories, and fun that you could ever want. You can join us in Discord for more fun and to see these conversations come out before they appear on a podcast. Fun.
You could inspire the next Shardcast.
You
topic.
could. You
Yes,
very
you
well
could.
could. You very well could. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, YouTube. You can leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like the show, you can support us on Patreon. And we will see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Farewell.
Bye.
That's a weird looking mink.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's
She is a
continue.
And
weird
sure,
Okay.
let's do that.
okay. Hi, Nadi.
The people listening to this podcast, it will feel natural in their native tongue. Easy.
Yeah.
So they're like, they looked at this bug thing and they're like, it's a bug dog. Axe hound.
Yeah.
It's an axe
that-
dog.